You are standing in front of one of the strangest ancient sites in all of Egypt. A sunken monument carved directly into the bedrock, colossal granite pillars, quiet canals, an underground chamber filled with unanswered questions. They call it the Osireion, and from the outside, it's already a mystery. But once you step inside, that mystery deepens. This structure doesn't fit neatly into any category. While it shares the architectural DNA of 18th and 19th dynasty royal tombs, unlike most tombs where offerings are made to the deceased, here, the living king makes offerings to a god. It's not a typical tomb. It's not a typical temple. It's something else, maybe a ritual machine designed to facilitate resurrection, rebirth, and something deeper still. And yet, at the very heart of that megalithic mystery are two stone recesses carved into the central podium, one square, one rectangular. So, what went here? And that's where this story starts. And the deeper I looked, the more I realized this isn't just a ruin, it's a puzzle, and I've been following the clues for years. Let me show you what I found.
What's up, everybody? Anyextee here, coming to you today from inside the Osireion at Abydos.
So, you might have heard of the theory recently raised by researchers that the square recess at the center of the Osireion once held a granite pillar. It's a thoughtful observation. After all, like Snake Brothers have already pointed out, the recess is slightly countersunk like a socket carved into the floor. Similar recesses may exist beneath other Osireion pillars, suggesting standardized construction. That recess design would lock the block in place like a socket, preventing movement, and visually, it looks like a structural anchor point, possibly for a symbolic pillar at the center. It's a smart hypothesis, reasonable to conjecture, and I respect that kind of attention to stonework. But here's why I don't think it works. When Henri Frankfurt excavated the Osireion in 1926, his team recorded everything: pillar placements, masonry details, and in all of that, they never once mentioned a granite fragment, a broken chip, or even any debris consistent with a toppled central pillar. And this wasn't just some casual clearance. Frankfurt's publication remains one of the most meticulous studies of any Egyptian monument. If a granite column had once stood there or been broken apart, he would have said so. In the interest of fairness, and to play devil's advocate against my own hypothesis here, I would be remiss if I didn't mention something very interesting that I stumbled upon during my research. What I came across was an obscure thread of Egyptologists, sort of a who's who of Egyptology sharing notes, and I was only recently invited and given access, but this thread goes back over a decade ago. On it, one Egyptologist references how he discovered a granite stone with Seti's cartouche, repurposed from the Osireion, but reused in a nearby Coptic church. This stopped me cold. So, I made it my mission to find it. I tried reaching out, maybe to find his notes, but unfortunately, it turns out this Egyptologist is now deceased. I thought about trying to maybe reach out to family or see if I can talk to some of his colleagues to track down the notes. But if this hits a wall, I'm just gonna have to go boots to the ground and look for it by combing the entire area myself. Maybe during my next Egypt tour. In fact, if you're curious, we do have an esoteric Egypt expedition coming up in September that you can join at adeptexpeditions.com. I know, shameless plug, but it's on the list and you should be on the list at adeptexpeditions.com. Now, even if we do find the church, even if I'm able to identify the stone, that doesn't necessarily prove that there was once a granite pillar inside that central recess in the Osireion. It could have been a granite architrave or a ceiling beam.
All along here, you can see where it's left unfinished. And then you can see the ceiling, and this stone is broken.
We know those were stripped and likely reused. To be fair, some might argue that if there was a granite pillar in that central recess, it could have been broken down and repurposed. And that's possible. But here's the thing. In the ancient world, when later occupations came and reused stone, they would typically leave behind some sort of evidence, whether it's mason marks, fragments, chips, socket scars, anything. And here, nothing. And knowing how obsessively detailed Frankfurt was, If there was any sign of a granite pillar that would have been in that recess, I think he would have said something. And then there's the architectural logic. The Osireion is symmetrical. Uniform granite pillars line both sides of the central hall. We don't see lone central columns, especially not ones that break the visual harmony of an otherwise balanced layout. In Egyptian architecture, symmetry wasn't optional, it was cosmic. One random pillar in the center, that breaks the pattern. So maybe that recessed square is just pulling our focus away from the real mystery hiding in plain sight, because just next to the square is something stranger, a second recess, rectangular, longer, narrower, and totally unlike anything else in this complex. Whatever went here wasn't a pillar. It couldn't have been, and that's the real mystery.
It would have been straight across.
Yeah.
And then, it would have been here for ancient Egyptians, but then the Coptic times, they cut down below even more. Why? Why would they go down?
I think to see something down.
Yeah, it would be like this one.
Yeah, like this, yeah.
So you've seen the square recesses, you've heard the pillar theory, but now look again with fresh eyes. Right here, this rectangular recess doesn't match anything else in the Osireion. It's not decorative, it's not structural, and it's definitely not a base for a pillar. Too long, too narrow, too deep. No known Egyptian pillar fits. So then, what was it? And what went in here? Let me take you back to a myth older than kingship itself, the story of Osiris. Osiris, the god who died and was torn apart and then resurrected. His body reassembled, his spirit restored by the magic of Isis, who took the form of a kite, hovering above him to conceive their son, Horus. Horus was the living king, and Osiris was the deceased king. A divine resurrection, a transfer of kingship from father to son, the dead god risen, giving life to the living. And at the site of that transformation, a lion-headed bed, a symbol of death and rebirth, a sacred bier. What is a bier? A bier is a platform used in funerary rites, especially during embalming and in a lying state. But in ancient Egypt, it was more than that. It was a stage where death gave way to eternity. Carved in the form of a lion, fierce, eternal, solar in nature, a lion's head at either end, the body forming the bed. Seen in tomb paintings, coffins, and temple reliefs. Most iconic example, King Tut's tomb. In the embalming chamber, Anubis resting atop a lion-headed bier. Not symbolic, real, preserved, used. Symbolism of the lion stood for the power, protection, and the daily solar cycle. In funerary ritual, they symbolized triumph over death, guardians of the horizon. They mirrored the soul's passage through the duat into the afterlife. Now, back to the Osireion. This recess, long, narrow, deep. It fits a lion-headed bier perfectly. Mwah, chef's kiss. And this isn't speculation. This is ritual architecture. Above this chamber, in Seti I's temple, we see the exact scene. And again throughout Egypt. Osiris, lying on the lion-headed bier. Isis beside him, transformed into a kite, hovering above.
And over here, Isis takes the form of the bird. It's impregnated by Osiris.
This wasn't art, this was the ritual, and this was the room. The Osireion isn't just a tomb, it's a ritual machine, a resurrection chamber in stone. And what better centerpiece than a lion bed placed right here? Not a granite column, a god, reborn. It all lines up, myth, layout, temple above, sacred kingship below. And the more I studied the Osireion, the more I realized it's not just Egyptian. This ritual pattern, it shows up everywhere, across cultures, across centuries. A god dies, a god descends, a god returns. Dionysus, Tammuz, Jesus, Osiris. Names shift, cultures change, but the archetypal principle remains the same. Let's take a closer look. 1. A bed for death and stillness. In the Osireion, the lion-headed bier is no mere artistic detail, it's the ritual core. Osiris doesn't lie in a coffin, he rests on a platform, exposed, awaiting transformation. In the Dionysian mystery schools, the god's dismembered body is ritually remembered, symbolically reassembled. Initiates enter a trance, lying still, becoming the god before they are reborn. In Christianity, Jesus is laid on a stone slab. His death is real, but temporary. That bed becomes a cosmic threshold, where stillness gives way to resurrection. 2. A cave for containment and mystery. The Osireion is a chamber cut into the earth, a symbolic cave. You descend into it, just as Osiris descended into the Duat. Dionysus, an infant, is hidden in a cave, nurtured, protected. Later, mystery schools would return to this image, the cave as a womb, as a threshold, as initiatory space. For Jesus, the tomb is also a cave, stone sealed, darkness, bound, but not forever. The cave becomes a portal, death in, life out. 3. Water, for rebirth and cosmic return. At the Osireion, water is always present, rising from the earth. It's not incidental, it's foundational, and we'll cover this more in my forthcoming deep dive presentation. It represents Nun, the primordial ocean from which creation and resurrection emerge. In Dionysian rites, sacred fountains cleanse and awaken. They symbolize the dissolution of the self, making way for a new identity. In Christianity, baptism becomes the rite of death and return. You descend into water. You rise again, new, eternal, divine. So step back and you'll see each tradition uses the same 3 elements. A bier or bed for death and stillness. A cave for containment and the mystery. This was sort of like a cocoon. And the water for the rebirth and cosmic return. And the Osireion fits this perfectly, not just in symbol, but in stone. It's not just architecture. It's myth made physical. It's ritual in granite, a resurrection engraved in the silence. Author of the Osireion, A Layman's Guide, Keith Hamilton writes, and I quote, "The central island is seen as the primeval hill with a double set of steps. Upon his hill, Osiris was enthroned or entombed." End quote. This is crucial. The primeval hill wasn't just symbolic. It was the mythic center of creation, the place where life began, where Osiris was enthroned after death. The Osireion was designed to represent that. So placing a lion-headed bier or a statue right in the center of that hill, that's not guesswork, that's reenactment. And with respect to the recessed cavities, author of the Cenotaph of Seti I at Abydos, Henri Frankfurt writes, and I quote, "The most easterly may well have been meant to contain a shrine with the canopic jars, the oblong one to its west, a sarcophagus." End quote. Frankfurt thought the rectangular recess might have held a sarcophagus, and the square one, a canopic shrine, a reasonable interpretation, but we now have something more. Still skeptical? I get it. Art, myth, theory, it's compelling, but is there hard evidence? Yes, there is. Tutankhamun's bier, it's real, but the real smoking gun is even older. We gotta go all the way back to the first dynasty. The royal tomb of Jer, one of Egypt's earliest kings, later reinterpreted as the tomb of Osiris, a cenotaph, a stand-in for the god's burial, just like the Osireion. And inside, a statue of Osiris, lying on a lion-headed bier. Not a depiction, not a myth, a real artifact, tangible, now in the Cairo Museum. This is archaeological proof tying the ritual of Osiris directly to Abydos. So when Seti I built here, he wasn't just honoring tradition, he was resurrecting it. As I explored in my last video, and if you missed it, I'll link it below, we looked at the Wehem Mesut, Seti's mission to revive the old ways. The site, it wasn't chosen at random. It was believed to be the place of the ancestors and final resting place of Osiris. Thus, the heart of pilgrimage, a sacred landscape aligned with the primeval hill, the mythic ground of rebirth. The perfect foundation for Seti's 19th dynasty monument, not just a temple, an act of revival. So when Seti built here, he wasn't just honoring Osiris, he was setting the stage for his resurrection. And that recess, it wasn't for a pillar, it was for a god, laid on a lion-headed bier. Because to resurrect Osiris was to reset cosmic order, Ma'at, to recreate the universe itself, ritually and symbolically. After the chaos of Akhenaten, the temples razed, the gods erased, Seti had to restore it all. This wasn't just architecture, it was cosmology, a divine reboot. Now, just to be clear, the lion-headed bier theory in the Osireion is interpretive, not scholarly consensus, but not fringe either. It's grounded in real patterns from Egyptian ritual and funerary design. And the idea of a statue in the recess, well, that also fits Egyptian tradition, especially in connection to the primeval hill motif. Frankfurt's interpretation of a sarcophagus and canopic jaws, it remains a valid alternative, but I believe the strongest candidate is a statue of Osiris himself, just like those we see on the northern facade receiving offerings from the king. Maybe it stood alone, maybe it was flanked by a canopic shrine. Either way, it wasn't just symbolic, it was functional. A stage for resurrection, a throne for the god, a moment made eternal. So what do you think? Sarcophagus, canopic shrine, statue of Osiris? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your take. Because whatever once stood here, it meant something, and its story is far from over. If this raised new questions for you, if this hypothesis opened up a door to something deeper for you, don't stop there. Hit the like button. Of course, that's also going to help us to get the video in front of more people, and leave a comment down below. Let us know, what did you think actually stood inside the recess? And if you want to take it deeper, don't forget to explore the Osireion playlist right here on this channel. It's a well-curated playlist with every clue, every theory, every revelation that we've covered thus far. And of course, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon so you can get updates on future videos. And if you want to take it a step deeper, if you want to experience the Osireion for yourself, you may want to get on my next Egypt trip. They always sell out. They fill up pretty quick, so you'll want to get on the email list over at adeptexpeditions.com.